Greetings, I'm Kia, and I'm here to read a crossover fic of Kaketya Hitman Reborn and Hetalia called Namimori by Pococo. I hope you all enjoy. Soft snores sounded as the breeze wafted through. A young teen sat on the roof of a school building as his fingers kneaded through the soft obsidian black hair. A small smile tugged at his lips as he gazed down at the owner of said hair. He let out a soft sigh of content as he did so. Really, he was never able to get any peace lately. If it's not trigger-happy babies, it was his other duties. Gazing up at the sky, his thoughts filled his head. He would have to talk to his chichue soon. If Reborn honestly was adamant in his claims of him being the heir of one of Italy's, and Europe by extension, biggest underground crime syndicates. Honestly, he had no interest in unsightly things like that. The only thing good he can see coming from this was one Yamamoto Takeshi's interest in the sword again. He smiled slightly, happy that Asari-san's sword style would not die out. There were many good things about being the Bongola boss, but at the same time it would clash with his other duties, which too were not quittable. After all, he was Tsunayoshi. Tsuna looked down at the now open steel-gray eyes that were gazing at him in a loving way. This, too, anyone else other than himself, would have scared them to the point of running away and wiping the image out of their mind. But he wouldn't be himself if it did. He gazed back with a look perhaps more loving than the other, but Tsuna knew that they loved each other about the same. "My Kyoya," Tsuna breathed out. Tsuna knew if it was anyone other than himself saying this, they would have been bitten to death several times. Hibari let out a soft snort before lifting a hand and trailing it alongside his face, trailing from his temple to his cheeks to his chin. "My Namimori." The smile on Tsuna's face was truly warm and beautiful. Not many knew his actual identity as the small town of Namimori, Japan. Honestly, he didn't know either until he was 6 years old. He had been walking around his town and catching sight of a short black-haired man in yukata, had rushed to him tugging on his sleeves. He can still remember what he had said to the man. He had called him Chichue and huddled close to him as if the other man would disappear. The older male had been shocked at the young child, but then realizing who it was that was clinging to him, had patted his hair and had said, "How have you been, Namimori-chan?" It was then that he remembered. He was Namimori, a small town located near Tokyo in Japan. His father, true land, was one Honda Kiku, also known as the country of Nihon, Japan. His name was Sawada Tsunayoshi. He was 6 years old, but he was so much older. Maybe not physically, but mentally he was. His chichue had explained about the ways of city personifications were born. Cities were short, lived, and ever fleeting. Because of that fact, they lived shorter lives than countries. They were born to humans and lived a more human life than countries ever would. It was because of this fact that he was able to be who he was today. Kyoya, on the other hand, well, how they met was a whole different story. Clan Hibari had been protectors of Namimori for many decades, since the age of samurai. So naturally, even to this day, the members of said clan still roam the streets of his city, protecting it, and the head of said clan was currently looking up at him with such loving eyes. For so many years, the only one who would look at him with those eyes were his Okasan and Chichue. But then that meeting with Hibari, that one day when he was 10 and the other 13 had occurred. Their meetings were perhaps destiny, or perhaps he and Hibari were fated by the red string of fate to be together. Chuna knew who the other was immediately. Information about the young teen came surging to his mind, and he had grimaced because of it. Hibari, in typical Hibari fashion, thought the other had a problem with him and had gone to bite him to death, read beat him up. After dodging after a while, his Chichue had taught him basic moves. He had put a hand on the other's arm and pushed his aura out a bit so the other would know who he was. Honestly, Chuna had been okay with telling the other who he was. He was a Hibari. He would protect him, he was sure. He had looked at the other, stopped short, and looked at him with a faraway gaze, and then bowed to him, apologizing. Of course, their relationship wasn't great right away. Hibari still preferred to be alone, but Chuna had literally attached himself to Hibari's hip and had refused to let go, even with Hibari's half-truthful threats of bodily harm. Whenever he had said those words, Chuna had just looked up at him, flashed a dazzling smile, and chirped in reply, "You wouldn't hurt me, Hibari-san." Hibari had then sighed and allowed his little herbivore to follow him around, and if anyone had looked at Chuna with hateful looks, he would beat them up. When Chuna was 13 and Hibari 16, Chuna had confessed that his feeling for the young black-haired teen was more than just friendship. Hibari had looked at him in momentary shock. His town, his beloved Namimori, loved him? He had then given a soft smile, out of character for him, but he always had seemed that way around the young town, and hugged him, confessing the same. When Chuna was 14, Reborn had come, and they had to hide their relationship. It was hard, Hibari having to pretend to dislike his beloved, and Chuna with having to not turn to Hibari whenever he so much as scraped a knee. He was very clumsy, and Hibari would scowl but patch it up anyway. But they had gotten through all the hardships, and now it was currently 2 weeks after the future incident. Chuna could still remember the absolute terror he had when he had first learned that he had died. Because, after all, if a town or city died immediately, the next born child in said town was awarded the honor of being the personification. But when he realized that no one else but he was Namimori again, he had calmed down. And then seeing the older Hibari too, he knew the other was tense because of his death, so much so that as soon as he had seen the other, he had pulled him into his special section of the hidden base, ravaging his mouth as he hastily tried to get as much touch in as he could to reassure himself that yes, his Chuna, his Namimori, was still there, and he was still alive. He could also still remember the roaming hands, the short breaths, and the loud moans as his thoughts were cut off by soft pale lips on his, and he reached in turn, deepening the kiss from his lover. Kyoya. He could feel the other practically smirking into the kiss. Chuna was content. Sure, he still didn't tell his family about his position as the town of Namimori, but at least he had Kyoya, and his father if they didn't take it well. Hearing his phone let off the Namichu school anthem, of course put there by his boyfriend, he checked the number and answered, making a sign for the other to be quiet. "Hello? Namimori, how have you been?" The loving voice of his father resounded out of the cell phone. "Chichewa, I have been fine. I have been resting up since my last Bongala adventure." Giggled a little, and could hear his father on the other end mumbling about crazy Europeans. Chuna couldn't blame him when he thought the same thing. "Namimori, I think it's about time you tell the others who you are. You can't keep it from them forever, especially since you saw that in 10 years' time you will be the head of the Bongala." "But Chichue, what if—" "My little Nami-chan, this isn't like you. Where is my confident little troublemaker who would always hide under my yukata sleeves when he got in trouble? Tsunayoshi, I'm sure they will accept you for who you are. And if not, then we can go through with what we had agreed on when you were younger. If they really react as badly as you seem to think they will, you can come live with me. I'm sure your mother will allow you to. After all, while Sawada Nana doesn't know exactly who Honda Kiku is, she has known him since Chuna was 6 and trusts the man and her country with her young son. Yes, Chichiwe, but are you sure? Yes, I have gotten the government's permission. You can tell them anything about us except top government secrets. I trust you, my son. Good luck and I love you. And with that, Japan hung up and Chuna looked at his phone as if willing to. Tsunayoshi? Kyoya, what am I going to tell them? Chichiwa wants me to tell them. Sitting up that he was kneeling, Ibari placed his arms around the petite brunette, whispering comforting words in his ear. Chuna calmed down. Do not worry, Tsunayoshi. If they really react that badly, I'll bite them to death. Chuna looked at him bemusedly. I know, my protector. I know. Thank you. Leaning in, they kissed each other again, letting their worries for the other wash away, as they comforted each other the only way they knew how, through physical affection.